Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here for a little pre-Thanksgiving this and that, and I mostly wanted to talk about some of the things I'm going to be making for our dinner this year, and even some of the things that I do make occasionally but I probably won't be doing this year, so that I can direct you back to the various video recipes I already have out on these things I'll be talking about. But before I do that, I want to show you real quick. This I've had for years, and it's a little lighted house. A little story behind this is I've always loved fall decorations. It's always been my favorite time to decorate, and so I have leaf garland and all kinds of stuff. And my oldest son, I think he was about 9 years old at the time, he bought this for me at our local store, and I just love it. It's just absolutely adorable. And so every year, in fact, I don't even put this away anymore. It stays out in our main room over there, where that's now, instead of our quote-unquote dining room, which is really tiny, in our rec room over there is now our dining room as well. So it just stays out there year-round because I like it so much. I don't even want to put it away anymore. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of the things I'll be making this year, and also want to give you a few ideas. So one thing I do traditionally make every Thanksgiving, and that is my own homemade, organic, from scratch chocolate pie. And yes, I actually have two videos out there, but I'm going to link you to the most recent one down below. And I start off using raw organic cacao powder, and you can also tailor that recipe. Even though I use milk in that, you can tailor that recipe to suit you if you're vegan, and you can switch out the cow milk or goat milk for your own homemade nut milks. And so I have all kinds of recipes on making your own homemade nut milks. I would think the pecan cashew milk would be a good one for this particular one, but whatever you choose to do. I'll go ahead and link to my, as well as the chocolate pie recipe, I will link to the whole playlist I have on dairy-free products. So there's quite a few different nut milk videos, different nut combinations, as well as a few other dairy-free items that I put in there that I make using the nut milk. And then another pie option I'm not going to be doing this year, but something I wanted to remind you of, is that if you dehydrated, let's say you have, somebody gave you a bunch of apples, or you have some apple trees, and one of the ways you decided to preserve your apples was to slice them up and dehydrate them. Well, you can use those dehydrated apples for making pies. In fact, that's the main reason I dehydrated up apples, because they're not my favorite fruit to snack on dried, but I do like using the dried apples for making either a fried dried apple pie or a regular dried apple pie. And so I do have a recipe on how I do that. I will link to that down below as well. And I should do a video someday on how to make fried apple pies, or just fried pies. And it doesn't have to be dried apples, it can be. That's usually what I use though for those kind of things. And then of course, we do stick pretty traditional. Once in a great while I might mix things up and make homemade raviolis or something like that for our Thanksgiving dinner. But I really like doing the turkey because it's the only time of the year I'll do turkey. I'll get the biggest one I can and then preserve up the rest of it for other meals throughout the year. So what I like to do for a stuffing, I use the Lundberg wild rice blend, and so I make a wild rice stuffing or dressing, whatever it's called. I don't know. People have different names depending on what it is, and I always call it stuffing because I'm stuffing it into the bird. So I do have a video recipe on that. It's going to be kind of an older one, but I will link to it down below. So that's an easy recipe. And the thing is about most of the things I make for a Thanksgiving dinner, a lot of it comes from food storage, other than the turkey itself, because I don't store whole turkeys in our freezer. I only buy them when I need them because they take up a lot of room. Then cook it up. Then I'll put up the turkey broth, the turkey meat, and use it in different ways. And that reminds me, I brought out some of my dehydrated chicken because I'll be doing that with some of the turkey this year, because even though to rehydrate it like this, if you haven't pressure cooked it, I've never tried pressure cooking it to see the difference, but they say to dehydrate like turkey or chicken, it's best if you want to rehydrate it later to pressure cook it first rather than just roast it or bake it like you normally would. But I am still loving this as a snack. So even though it doesn't rehydrate great for adding to meals, you can either powder it up to add to meals, you know, making chicken enchiladas or whatever it is, or chicken fettuccine. But my favorite thing for this is just to snack on it. I love the crispy crunchiness of it, and it tastes so good. So I'm going to be doing that with the turkey this year. Now, another thing I like to make is to have some crackers on hand, whether it be homemade crackers. This year I cheated and I got a big box of those ones from Costco because they had them on sale for a really good price, and I bought them online. And so with that, I'll be making a salmon dip. Now, I do have a recipe out for a clam dip, and it's basically the same idea. I'll link to the clam dip recipe down below because I don't think I have a salmon dip recipe. But anyway, same idea. You're just replacing the clams with salmon. So I'll probably be using the canned salmon. This was the salmon Patrick got back in 2019 when he went fishing with his dad. And so I'll be using some of this most likely. The other option is if you have some in the freezer, maybe you can bake some up for dinner early in the week, you know, just for a regular dinner. Then take your leftovers and use that for making your salmon dip. So basically it's just cream cheese, salmon, and then whatever spices you want to add. And I don't use measurements. I just add stuff in and then taste it as I go. And one of the things I have enjoyed adding to these kind of dips when I make them, usually I'll just put in, because I'll have like dehydrated onions, dehydrated garlic granules, things like that already in storage. But because I do enjoy Mother Earth products and thought I'd give some of their soup mixes a try, not so much for soup, but as for using in dips and that kind of stuff. And their 3 onion soup dip mix is actually really good to add to the dips. And so I'm going to be doing that this year. So I'll put in a big scoop of that. Again, no measurements, but if you go back and look at my clam dip recipe, you can see how I made that just from separate ingredients rather than using a mix like this. So however you want to do it, it's a super easy process, and you can make a pretty tasty dip just having whatever on hand. Steelhead is another really good one to replace those clams with when you're making a dip like that. And then, though I make cranberry sauce every year because I love cranberry sauce, but I want to describe, since I don't have a recipe on my own cranberry sauce out there yet, I don't know why, I've just never done one. But I like to use a mix. I don't use just cranberries. I usually pull some of my raspberries from our own homegrown raspberries that we used to grow until our raspberries suddenly up and died. I'll take some of those. Sometimes I'll add blueberries. I usually add some oranges as well. And I just chop up the oranges and I cook it all together. And then when it's done, I'll usually add some honey to sweeten it, you know, raw honey, because you don't want to cook the raw honey, especially. You're going to lose all the great benefits. So it's better to have it, to add it in later after it's all done. I think this time I'm going to add, now that I have walnuts in my food storage finally, I think I'm going to add walnuts to it this year because I love walnuts in cranberry sauce. Right here I have some apple juice from last year when I froze up a bunch of apple juice. I finally pulled some out of the freezer, and one thing I thought about doing was taking the apple juice to cook the berries in, so I thought would give it an even better flavor, and add some more of that natural sweetness because I didn't sweeten the apple cider when I pressed it out. Now this one is actually in the process of fermenting. I added some fermentation starter to it yesterday morning, and so it's probably got a couple more days to go. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm making a sparkling apple cider. So that's another thing you can think, if you typically like to have apple cider, the sparkling apple cider at your holiday meals, well, you can make your own. So if you already have some apple cider that you've put up in storage, whether it be you canned it or you froze it like I did, then you can easily make your own sparkling apple cider. It takes 3 days, so you want to be ahead on it. I will go ahead and link to my recipe down below on how I do that. Now, usually I do make a pumpkin pie, but because of our small group this year, I'm going to be nixing the pumpkin pie. But last year when I made the pumpkin pie, I used Mary's idea for making my own evaporated milk from milk, because I always have some kind of milk in food storage. I have it in all forms. And so I made my own evaporated milk, which basically you just cook it down until it's 50% of it is left, And there you have evaporated milk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go find Mary's video on how to make your own evaporated milk, and then I'll link to that down below. It made an excellent pumpkin pie when I did that. So I recommend you try that. If you don't have any evaporated milk already in storage in the form of cans, but you have lots of fresh milk, you can make your own evaporated milk as well as your own sweetened condensed milk, and Mary also has a video on that. But one thing for sure I'll be doing with some of my pumpkin that I'll be pulling out of the freezer, and because I have some in jars since I've switched to jars, but I still have some back when I was using the food saver bags, and so I'll be pulling those ones out first. Those are the ones I'm trying to work through first. I'll be making the iced pumpkin cookies. That is now one of our favorite things, and those actually I like better than the pumpkin pie. So instead of pumpkin pie, I'll be making the pumpkin cookies. So we'll already have the chocolate pie, so I'll make those pumpkin cookies. Again, I will link to that recipe down below as well. They're a very soft cookie, and then you can do the icing. And one of the changes I made to the recipe that I had found on those, I took it and did my own tweaks and came up with my own recipe that way. But one of the changes I made was using some of the pumpkin puree in the icing itself. So you're getting the pumpkin in the icing, that flavor in the icing, as well as in the cookie. So it makes a wonderful cookie that everybody seems to love it. So definitely I'm doing that. And then another thing you can do if you have lots of pumpkin on hand, and I'll do this one from time to time, is to make a pumpkin dip. And that requires your pureed pumpkin and some cream cheese. And it's one of those dips it's a sweet dip, so it's really good to use with cut up fresh apples, or even some cookies like ginger snap cookies. Maybe you like to make homemade ginger snaps. Really good with those kind of cookies, or anything else you can think of using it for. Personally, I could eat it with a spoon because it is really good. And that's another reason why I won't be making any of that this year. But I will link to that recipe down below so you can check that out for yourself. And then another thing I won't be doing this year because my daughter-in-law is taking care of this, but is making my own homemade crescent rolls. Now, I don't have a video specifically about how to make the crescent rolls themselves, but I always use my same basic bread recipe, which is a yeast bread. And so I will link to my basic yeast bread recipe down below. And so then I just take that, make that recipe up, and instead of making it into a loaf, I then make it into crescent rolls. And how you do that is you divide it up into several pieces, into balls about this size, roll them out into like you're gonna make a pie crust, and then cut that into 8 pieces, just like you'd cut a pie, and then roll each one. And I always like to spread a little bit of butter on that disc that I have rolled out before I slice it, and then I roll them up and then fold them over, and that's how I make the crescent rolls. And that's a real nice tasty addition, and since they're already buttered, people don't have to add butter to it unless they want just a little bit more. All right, well, there's some of my favorite Thanksgiving Day recipes. Hopefully you can find something in there that's maybe a little bit different if you want to just switch things up and you want to add to your own dinner this year. Don't forget, click on either show more, which you'll find right down here below my channel name, or that little gray triangle if you're on the smart device over here, to open up the description box and see all the video links I have down below. All right, well, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving, by the way. Take care, and God bless.